Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa defended government against the scrutiny of Parliament just moments ago. This was his first question and answer session. Ramaphosa dealt with his stance on prescribed assets, on Bosasa deals and campaign fundings. Let's take a quick look at some of those responses.
I have over and over again outlined the economic trajectory of our country, and it is, so you know and understand, it is an economic trajectory that is well appreciated by people in business, by people that we meet overseas, even at the World Economic Forum. In a few days, in 10 days or so, we will have the whole of the world, investing world, coming here. And we are going to have a World Economic Forum, the Africa version, right here in this city. I would like to invite him to come and walk close to me so that he can hear precisely what the investing world is saying about our economic policies. So, Madam Speaker, I want to repeat that the African National Congress has the most progressive policies that it has put in place. The issue of prescribed assets has been discussed over and over and over again. And in the end, Madam Speaker, we are going to pursue policies that are going to advance the interests of our people here in South Africa and also advance the interests of the pension fund holders, the very workers of this country who are members of the trade unions, who themselves are the beneficiaries of all these pension funds. Madam Speaker, our policies are very clear, and we are pursuing a strategy and a trajectory of economic policy and reform that is seen as being quite positive by the investing world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, I address you in terms of Rule 1426 of the National Assembly rules. That is the type of response you expect from a loan shark, not from a president. The question was clear. Do you support prescription of assets? The President has given us some meanders. He has not answered the question. Do you support prescription of assets or not? Simple question.
He had a clear, pure business relationship with the Bosasa company in relation to work that they were doing in Uganda, and it had nothing to do with the work that was being done here in South Africa between himself and the state. So, in my view, there's not much more that needs to be followed up, because the contract, which has been seen also by the public protector, clearly talks about the business that he was doing with them in Uganda, and he has himself gone ahead to say he's learning in business, and this is one relationship that he regrets having gotten into. So that puts that aside. With regard to other funds or monies contributed by Bosasa, I am not aware of them. I do not know of them having been contributed to the campaign or whatever trust. The one that I finally got to know about after the fact is the 500,000, which is now a subject of discussion or litigation between ourselves and the public protector in the courts of our country.
Well, of loan sharks and meanders, we're going to be unpacking that a bit more in a panel discussion with Professor Nhlanhla Cyril Mbatha, who's a Unisa Graduate School of Business Leadership Professor, and he's joining us via Skype. And in studio, I'm joined by Hermann Pretorius. He's an analyst with the Institute of Race Relations. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time to join us. And I think our conversation is pretty clear. We're going to start off by just looking at the President's responses to some of the questions issues. And I think the big question was the question on the contraction of the economy, or at least the most important question. Hermann, let me get your sense first and how the president spoke to this question, and whether you felt that this did justice to the state of the economy in the country.
You know what, it's almost like we're listening to the president of a different country. He introduces he starts this question and answer session with this plea for investment and bragging about the success of the investment summits and all of the, saying that we need to attract investment, we need to create the environment for investment. And then he goes on to mention some successes. But the problem is this just ignores the fact that 102 billion rand in equity and bonds have left this country in 2019 alone. That's a huge number. If we're going to, and he referred the leader of the opposition to, or he asked him to join him when he goes to this new investment summit and listen what the investors are saying about South African policies. But the problem is money talks, and the money is saying we're leaving this country.
So, Prof. Nhlanhla, let me come to you. Hermann is saying it sounds a little bit deluded given what's been happening in terms of capital flight out of the country. Your thoughts on the question of economic contraction and some of the comments that were made around the World Economic Forum and improving investment in the country?
So, yeah, I found initially that the president was not quite as confident in responding, especially to the questions from the DA. But as the session went along, I think he got more control in the House in terms of his responses. The three things that I thought that he was trying to battle with in terms of managing, three variables for me, would be the interests of the people, trying to appease that sector, and then the variable around the economic problems that the country is facing, as well as trying to boost investor confidence, as well as the legal technicalities, the law, the process itself. So those three themes for me were quite strong in his trying to respond to some of the questions and trying to balance them out, making sure that that they are all balanced.
So let me just quickly stay with you, Nhlanhla, on that point, because you've outlined something quite important, that potentially this was a test for President Ramaphosa, because we know that he's been a president under pressure, that there have been many voices trying to separate him and this rhetoric of the new dawn. We know that there have been a lot of internal tensions within the ANC that have put this tagline under pressure. Do you think that he did a good job? Was he able to appease each of the stakeholders that you've outlined?
Yeah, so it depends. If you're asking me today, where after I've thought more carefully about this, I may give you a different answer. But for today, I think you just managed to get by. I mean, the big issue, the example was around the issue of land reform, for example. The president was asked whether or not the report from the panel of experts would be forming part of his moving forward in terms of implementing the recommendations. It was interesting how he responded, for example, to the issue of expropriation without compensation. In his response, he said that yes, the report and the panel did advance using the EWC, which is expropriation without compensation. What he didn't do, though, was add that there were conditions to that, how that should be approached, that issue should be approached. For example, in terms of identifying very specific issues that have to be cases that have to be identified, and how those cases would be identified, where expropriation without compensation would happen at zero compensation. Yeah. So the report did not give a blanket approval of expropriation without compensation, but in his response, he did not mention this.
So let me just jump in for a second, and I'll come to you, Hermann, on that point, because this was something that a lot of us were watching to see how we would respond to the question on land reform and agriculture, and that question coming, I think, coming from the IFP in particular. Your thoughts on some of the exclusions that that Nhlanhla speaks about?
Well, it's interesting. You see, the problem is this is the report is advisory. And South African politics, political history of the last 24 years is littered with presidential advice reports that were just ignored. So we shouldn't read too much into this panel as, you know, this limits expropriation without compensation. The long and short of it is this approves the principle. And the ANC will go on with this. And even within the parameters of this panel report, at the end of the day, it gives the government incredible coercive power to bully people either into accepting their named price or expropriating it, you know, out of hand. So this is an issue of, you know, there's this. I'll keep this short. There's Winston Churchill once sat next to a woman at dinner, and he asked, "Would you sleep with me for £1 billion?" And she said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Well, will you sleep with me for £10?" And she said, "What kind of woman do you think I am?" And he said, "Well, I think we've established that. We're now just haggling over the price." And that's what it is with expropriation. It's the principle.
I'm not going to forget that anecdote. I think it's a brilliant story. I have time for just one more comment from each of you, and I'm going to just stay with you, Hermann, and get your comment on the CR17 campaign and the question around whether there's going to be an independent inquiry around Bosasa, because those, if you put them together, were credibility questions, really. And I think the broader question is, can you be trusted? Your analysis of how you responded to that and the kind of tone that left you with.
Well, what we see, it was striking to me that this isn't the Cyril Ramaphosa of Tumamina. This isn't the Cyril Ramaphosa of watch this space, Mr. Maimane. This isn't the Cyril Ramaphosa inviting Malema and Maimane to join him in song. This is quite the beleaguered president. I think it's clear for all to see. So the factional infighting, it's taking its toll. I think we can see that. And in it to take that through to policy, the pressure on him to push policies like prescribed assets, like expropriation without compensation, like the NHI, that seems to be a play so that he can dominate somehow in the ANC, because he seems incredibly weak, and I think today's performance shows that.
Nhlanhla, final question to you. I'd love your thoughts on how you think he did in terms of defending his integrity, questions about Bosasa, questions about the campaign. How do you think the president did on that front?
Look, I mean, I slightly agree with my colleague there in the studio in terms of how he, in the end, presented himself in terms of credibility. I think it was very clear that he would like, for many of the issues, that he would like the law itself to take process around the issue of the public protector as investigation, for example, around the issue of the CR17, around the issue of land. The message that I got from the president today was that what he would like to do, he would like to let the courts processes be the determining factors into the outcomes in each of those those areas. So whether or not that is relegating responsibility, whether it is empowering our judiciary system into playing a role in our democracy, that's probably open to a debate. But I think that he was very cautious in terms of trying to let us know that at the end of the day, if we allow these processes to run themselves through, we are more likely to reach outcomes that are more democratic, are more valid, are more acceptable to different sectors of society, and that he's not really playing the part of a dictator who's got all solutions for all areas in terms of our problems in the economy. So personally, I was quite impressed that he managed to do that, even though it seemed like a very difficult session for him to manage.
A difficult session indeed, and that's a very big thank you to Professor Nhlanhla Cyril Mbatha, who's a Unisa graduate, School of Business Leadership professor there, joining us via Skype. And in studio, we're joined by Hermann Pretorius, who's an analyst at the Institute of Race Relations.